Glancing around the flashing lights that displayed above, I let out a smile face onto my features. The smell of the cold evening air filled my nose, along with the musty pine scent from the man next to me, Shoto Todoroki. He was a man I admired greatly, with every being that I was. He stood next to me as we walked through the booming city, the sound of soft sirens, loud chanting, and echoing footsteps. It was the city, a city where we both unfamiliar with, as it wasn't anything we've seen before. Having been put on foreign missions together, we were sent to travel to New York, the Big Apple, and to say I expected what was to come, I would be lying. The city was large, decorated with buildings at every inch of the city and streets that were bustling with people. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. I used to be quiet, smaller cities and I was used to this quiet, smaller cities and towns that were never this many people, and there surely weren't as many skyscrapers that touched the skies. They were more civil and more friendly as everyone knew each other. But this city, this was something different. My eyes traveled around to the people walking on by us, trying to take notice of each one and memorize each detail, but I couldn't. There were too many that I couldn't even keep my eyes focused on one, because soon they would be replaced with a second and soon third. So I stayed close to the dual-haired man, trying to make sure I didn't lose him in the huge crowd of wondering people. It was around midnight, and yet the waves of people kept coming, slowly getting smaller with each minute. The buildings about a block away, Shoto said naturally in Japanese instead of English, as it was what we used to. Yeah, we spoke English and knew how to, but to each other it was just easier to speak in our natural language. It did earn us a few glances from a couple of people, but for the most part, people ignored us. I mean, after all, we looked like normal citizens, not like special heroes. I nodded to him as I spotted the familiar-looking building with multiple neon present signs. Of course, we were going to an underground club. It was our mission. Supposedly, there has been some international legal trade business that has happened for the past month, and this is where our guy was supposed to be. It wasn't anything special on the outside, just another nightclub where multiple people went to have a good time. But of course, to those with higher up power, it was a special place. It was an underground place of legal trade, business deals, affairs. So in all, it was a hellhole. Now, we weren't even in disguise, since we are part of the international hero force and weren't as well known, which is surprising, even how talented Todoroki was shown to be in the hero field. But even so, we were never once to be on television or announced in public. We were the ones that worked undercover and in the background, dealing with the lesser-known villains that caused trouble. You seem shaken, Shoto stated, and I jumped a little in my thoughts as I saw we were now walking up towards the big buster of the club. I look up at him, seeing his eyes peering down at me, a small noticeable look of worry on his face. I shook my head at him, shooting a smile as he approached. I'm fine, don't worry. Turning to see the bouncer eyeing us, I leaned into Shoto, watching as he reached into his pocket of his suit, pulling out a fancy golden card. Holding it up to the bouncer, we noticed his eyebrows and eyes widen a bit under his sunglasses, which made no sense to me. Before he reached over to let us through the door, holding it open for us, I flashed him a smile along with a fake giggle, trying to blend in a bit to the party crowd folk. Looking up to Shoto, we walked through the doors. So, what's the plan now? I wasn't paying attention earlier. I could hear him sigh before giving a small chuckle. That does not surprise me. I could feel his hand shake around and lay on top of one of mine and hugged his arm. Well, the agency said that we should try collect information for now. There is no need to infuriate and risk casualties to the other people here. So, we stalk him? I asked, following him as we made our way through the loud crowd to a small booth in the corner. Sitting down, I noticed the music change into a more of a low brass type of song that seemed to shake the place slightly. Feeling lightly uncomfortable, I looked to Shoto, watching him sit in front of me. We collect information, not stalk. His eyes seemed to glance around the club, almost scanning over the crowd as if searching for someone, which he was, turning around to see as well. I could hear Shoto shift in his seat. I'll be back. Turning back around to see him escape from his chair, I threw up my hands, laughing a bit. Really? Leaving me already? He shook his head, looking back at me. Do you want a drink? Get me a Shirley Temple. I'm trying to lay off the hard drinks. I smiled to him, and he nodded. For a man of few words, he really doesn't know how to speak with them. Giggling a little to myself, I sat there for a minute or so, checking my phone and surroundings every now and then. I couldn't seem to spot Shoto, which worried me, as I wanted to know where he was just in case. Checking again, though, I couldn't find him. But instead, as I turned around, I was greeted with a familiar face. Hey there, beauty. The man seemed to lean forward towards the table. What's a pretty girl like you doing all here alone? It was the target. I didn't even know how to try and spot him. He came to me. Now's my chance to try and get information. Giving him a small smile to him, I laughed a bit. You know, that's the cheesiest thing you could have said, right? But it got a smile on that pretty face, now didn't it? He answered, his head turning towards the seat that was in front of me. Is it taken? He gestures to the seat, and I shook my head. No, go right ahead. And just like that, I was in. He sat down in front of me and flashed a charming smile as he sat down to a drink he had been holding. The name's Doreen Phillips. Doreen Phillips. I kept my fake flirtatious smile as I looked at him, ready to fake my entire story. Fake name, Shikihara. He raised an eyebrow at me, his smile showing interest as he leaned back in the seat, looking rather comfortable. Tsukihara sounds rather different. I waved my hand in front of me, rolling my eyes a bit. My family is originally from Japan. My parents moved to the U.S. before I was born, so... Ah, that explains it. He raised up his glass, taking a sip of his drink. So tell me more about yourself, Tsukihara. Well, I started thinking of the story I came up with back at the hotel, just in case I needed an ally. I'm single, middle-aged woman just trying to get behind the big city. Surely you can't be taking on this city alone, he asked, disbelief. I nodded at him. After I graduated with escondance in design from North Carolina State, I decided that I wanted to move to the big city. Why such a big move? He was rather interested in my story as he kept on asking more and more. I just always liked the big city, the bright lights, the overwhelming crowds, and the beauty of the buildings. It was just always something I wanted to experience. I smiled at him, hoping he didn't ask any more questions, which luckily he didn't. Sounds like a good reason, he admired. Looking to his drink, I felt my finger dance over to his seductively, letting them poke at his finger a bit before retreating. Now it's your turn. Tell me about you, since I told you about me. He chuckled a little. A selfish woman. I like that. Well, he said there for a moment to think. He was probably trying to piece his story together in order to try and pass it off as legal. I'm single, businessman who's making a big living in the big city with deals. Business? What kind of business? I asked, one hand sitting on the table while the other hand held my head up, with the elbow popping on the table. Let's just say I'm a trade man. He smirked, and just as I went to ask another question of him, I spotted a certain dull-haired man walking back to us with 2 drinks in hand. I knew he didn't see the target sitting there, which scared me, as I knew my cover was about to blow. Looking behind me, acting as if I was glancing around, I took my hand that held my head and slipped it down onto the table as well. I sharp breath in, trying back to the mission. I reached my hand to his hand and reached around his drink. So, tell me, I said, my voice distorting a bit as I used my quirk. What trade do you do, and where? I could see almost a foggy haze gloss over the man's eyes as he stared at me, looking almost like a puppet. I didn't know at all, besides his head looking up at me. His usual smirk that lied on his face was gone as he stared in my eyes. I smuggle weapons across borders, dealing them to villains all around that can't afford... Yen, what are you doing? Releasing my hand from the target, I could see him instantly snap back into life, his face contorting into one of anger. Sitting there, I watched as Durin stood from the booth, knocking over his drink. His eyes looked down at me in anger and horror as he shook his head, pointing a finger at me. He turned to see Shoto standing there with the drinks, looking at me and the target. Durin there put his finger down as he stepped back a bit. Who the hell are you people? He looked back down to me. Taking a step forward, he slammed his hands down on the table. This caused Shoto to set the drinks down at a different table, fast before standing beside me in a defensive stance. What did you do to me, you little bitch? I threw my hands up in defense, trying to keep my cover going. I just needed to know who you were. You can't exactly trust people in this day and age. Liar, you're here for me. He glanced up to Shoto, his eyes widening. You are too. I know you. Just then, I could see multiple soldier-like people start to appear and head our way, fear striking me as I watched them walk towards us. Knowing that everything was about to go down, I looked to the target again. Seeing him leaning over towards the table, I looked towards the suit, seeing a pocket hiding within the suit with something in it. I reached a hand out, quickly reaching inside the suit of the pocket. I pulled out a small pistol that was loaded. Sorry, I was moving. Looking to Shoto, I gave a nod, and he instantly pushed the target away on the table. Taking this opportunity, I jumped from the booth and quickly lifted the gun up to the ceiling, letting out 2 shots. Instantly, the club broke into chaos as the crowd started to run about. Screams and yells broke through the loud music as many were scared of what the shots were. Luckily, the running crowd seemed to hold back the soldier bodyguards as they pushed them around, causing me to pause their charge. But as I turned my head from the crowd back to Shoto and the target, I saw the target taking off and Shoto about to follow. Looking to him, I shook my head. You hold off his guys with your ice. I'll go after him. Shoto nodded to me, and before I took off, he grabbed onto my arm. Be careful. I smiled at him with waving a hand. I'm always careful. Turning around, I began to sprint off towards the target, taking the back way out of the club. Jumping over tables and chairs, I kept my eyes on the target in front of me as I kept running for them. Getting closer to them, I watched as he charged out the door, shoving it as hard as he could, his head turning back to glance behind him, seeing my figure running behind him. Pushing the doors open as well, I could see him panic. Running more on into the outside, he turned left, which made me feel better as I saw it was a dead end. Smiling, little to myself, I tripped, and helpless target in the corner, seeing him panic more. You are considered Phillips. There's no more to go. Oh, there's nowhere to go. Oh, you're cornered, Phillips. There's nowhere to go, I said, my confidence growing stronger as I held the gun up at him, getting into defense state. I kept my eyes trained on him. There's always a way to go, he yelled back, a smirk forming on his face as he turned back to face me. But I raised an eyebrow at him. I felt a sharp pain suddenly strike my side, which caused me to freeze in place. The gun fell from my hand as I looked up at my side, seeing a crimson red seeping through the clubbing outfit I had worn. The pain was sudden yet experienced feeling that seemed to spread through my body, causing me to drop to the ground. Falling onto my knees, I pushed a hand to my backside, trying to apply pressure to the wound, feeling a rush of sharp pain spring through me. I let a giant groan, my head snapping up to see Darren walking towards me, laughing. Told you there was a way. He smirked at me, and suddenly I saw him bring his foot back before kicking the side of my head, forcing me down completely. Now, tell me, who sent you? Letting out a grunt, I look up to see Darren, but bending down, picking up the guy from the ground next to me, picking it up. He cocked the gun, holding it to me with a grin. I said, who sent you? His voice was dark and much different than earlier in the club, as I could tell he felt powerful in this position. I sent a glare his way as I shook my head. I work for myself, I said through gritted teeth. Bull crap, and you know it. He was angered, shaking the gun a bit in front of me. Now, tell me. Just then, I watched as a sudden wave of ice appeared on top of me, and soon I realized the armed man that stood above me was suddenly in an iceberg. Took your time, I yelled, my side cramping up, causing me to hiss in pain. Looking up to see Shoto rushing towards me, I could see he hadn't have a scratch on him, unlike me. What happened? We need to get you to a hospital now. He spoke, helping me up from the ground. I laughed a little at him, shaking my head. It's fine. Just a little scratch. My voice seemed to trail off as I felt myself grow suddenly weak off the ground. You know, maybe we should go. I don't feel too well. I stumbled as I walked with Shoto, and suddenly, before I knew it, I was being carried by him. I could see the worried look on his face as he looked down at me. You're going to be okay. I have you. I nodded to him, my head becoming fuzzy and unclear as the sound of sirens and ambulance strung in my ear, sounding closer and closer. Soon I could see blurred red and blue lights appear, along with Shoto yells to them. I could feel my eyes flutter a bit as my grip on Shoto loosens, and just like that, my eyes fell shut as I fell asleep. Laying on the bed in our master room, I found Shoto, can you get me some ice cream? I yelled, looking towards the door of the room. We were back in our house, back in Japan, and currently I was on bed rest, and Shoto was forced to be my caretaker. We were both on hold for our positions as I was marked as injured and he as an excused absence. It wasn't fun as I wasn't able to move around too much, but it was fun as I got to spend the past few days with Shoto alone. It was a change of scenery as we never usually got to rest and be at peace. What kind? He yelled back from the kitchen. I smiled at him and paused the show on the TV. Do we have favorite kind of ice cream? Just a little bit, yes, he answered, bringing the container along with a spoon. He had a soft smile that rested on his face features as he walked over to the bed, handing the ice cream to me. Reaching out and grabbing it, I gave a goofy smile, opening the container almost instantly. Just as I did, I could feel the weight of the bed shift, and soon enough, there were arms wrapping around me. Looking over to see Shoto cuddling into me in his arms, I shifted a bit as he was so comfortable. After adjusting a bit, we both sat there in peace as I started to down the ice cream. Ian, I heard his voice suddenly whisper, his face coming close to my ear from behind. I hummed a response to him, leaning a little back into him. I love you. He was rather straightforward with it, which made me smile even more at him. I know, I answered, turning my head to look at him, planting a soft kiss onto his cheek. I rested my hand onto his shoulder. I love you too. Next time, though. His arms gripped me tighter, yet they were still so gentle as not to hurt. Don't get yourself... Okay, Elsa. That's not my name.